Welcome to the Freek Easy.
You gotta go like,
Yeah, that's right.
So I was gonna get the like.
Did you drop the
out?
Did you drop the Hitchcock and go back to the Crypt Keeper? Or?
Well, that's my Deadite.
yeah,
Oh,
so
okay. My bad.
The Freak by Dawn.
There we go. Now I get it. Freak by dawn, freak by dawn, freak by dawn.
Oh, you know what? I totally should have gone. Join us for the Freak Easy.
Cut it, yeah. Cut it. Cut it. Reshoot that.
Right there.
How does editing work? You can make that happen.
I don't know.
Oh, crap.
I just bang on my computer until it says
like the old
until it
days.
says you have done a thing.
Yeah,
and then it
that's
posts to
right.
YouTube.
That's right.
Guys, welcome back to the Freak Easy, spin-off podcast of the Geek Easy. I am your host, Scaren Jaren, and I am here as always with the number one co-host, Phantom Dan. And featuring, as always, special guest star, Plain Old Jonathan.
Hey,
Plain old Jonathan.
how are you?
What's up, guys?
I'm good.
Yeah?
Been a little edgy most of the
I
weekend.
was gonna say, little tense,
Yeah.
little on
Tense?
edge.
Yeah.
After
guys-
this.
I don't. I no longer enjoy darkness or trees.
Yeah, vines are the worst.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Guys, this week we are discussing geek horror royalty. Mm-hmm. I almost have this kind of thing where I felt like, it almost had mixed feelings about doing this episode because on one hand, the movies we're discussing tonight have been discussed and poured over and reviewed and lavished love upon by particularly like kind of the geek culture, the geek mainstream ad nauseum.
Sure.
But I also felt like, as representatives of that culture, we couldn't have a horror show without discussing them at least once.
Right.
So it's almost like getting them out of the way. I feel like it frees us up to do whatever we want from now on. Guys, we're discussing the Evil Dead series.
Oh yes.
Juiced.
Yeah.
So I always like to start talking about kind of our early memories of the Evil Dead. So my story happens backwards. Because I remember when I was my first memories are Army of Darkness. And I remember specifically it was coming out around the time I was collecting comics. Mm-hmm. And man, I swear that poster was on the back of every comic book I bought for a solid year and a half.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I remember looking at it, and it's such like, it's got that kind of, I don't even know who's the guy that does like the Star Wars, Indiana Jones posters.
I should know
You
the
should
name,
know.
but
everybody else
Yeah.
knows. But it's got that kind of look because it's got Ash in the front with like the chainsaw in his hand, and then there's like everything from the movie is in the background, and there's even like the little Ashes stabbing him in the ankle with the fork, and like the witch lady like hanging on to him, and I was like, this movie looks insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until a little while later that I actually saw the movie. When I had started playing, I had a crew that I played Dungeons and Dragons with, and we usually played Dungeons and Dragons on like a sleepover. It'd be like a full weekend when we got together and played.
Right.
And so eventually we'd get sick of playing and need to take a break. And there's only like a handful of movies that were good, like, Middle Ages sword and sorcery movies, and obviously like the Conans. What was the one with
Willow.
Lady Hawk is the one I think of. Legend.
Oh yeah, Legend.
And Excalibur were pretty much our circuit. And eventually Evil Dead made it into that circuit. Or not Evil Dead, but Army of Darkness made it into that circuit.
Nice.
And it was such an outlier, but it was kind of like my favorite, and it was so goofy and weird. And,
Yeah.
but it still had, swords and sorcery, and it was cool.
Right.
And then like eventually somebody said to one of the crew, like, oh yeah, that's part 3 of that, or that's the sequel to that other movie. And we were like, whoa, there's another one of these, which there wasn't.
Yeah. No,
Right.
It wasn't exactly.
Not one of those.
Yeah.
And there still isn't.
Yes. But that was how we found Evil Dead 2. And so then I watched Evil Dead 2, and I really found Evil Dead at the same time I really came into my own horror, because prior to that time, the horror movie had just been kind of like, sleepovers when I'm at a friend's house where we can watch. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because my mom didn't let me watch it.
Right.
And so, but I had several friends who did. And so, we'd watch a Freddy there. And then this was right around the time I was like 16. And all of a sudden I could drive myself to the video store and rent kind of whatever I wanted and watch it after mom went to bed or whatever. And, so I was really coming into my own. And Evil Dead 2 was kind of one of the first ones that was a regular rental for me.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I'd usually get, Evil Dead 2, maybe like one of the Nightmares, and then something that I hadn't seen before, one or two horror movies I hadn't seen before. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of my thing. And it took me forever. It honestly took me a while to find Evil Dead 1, because it was not widely distributed and widely available. I think it wasn't until they did one of the re-releases.
You guys remember when movies used to be hard to find?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
For sure.
Or like if you'd miss an episode of a TV show, you would just never ever see that TV show, that episode.
It's so crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've come a long way.
We have.
That was the reminiscing portion of.
Yeah, I never really, I don't have a lot of experiences with this, honestly, from like my childhood or anything, because I remember seeing that movie poster, like you said, like everywhere. Mm-hmm. Like the Army of Darkness poster is so iconic, and it was plastered everywhere, that it's easy to look at it and recognize exactly what it is, even if you've never seen that movie before. Yeah. And I think it's another one of those things, like we've talked about several times with Psycho and stuff, where Ash, the character with the chainsaw for a hand, is so iconic in pop culture that even if you haven't seen these movies, you probably are aware of that character's existence, or at least a guy with a chainsaw for a hand. So I didn't see the Evil Deads until I was in my 20s. So I never saw them when I was younger. I didn't see them until I was an adult. And I saw Evil Dead 1 and 2, and I remember specifically at the time being very confused what the continuity was between those two. Because I was like, well, so I don't get it. Like, 2's just like a remake of 1, or like what's actually going on here? And I never got like a real answer on that. So that was always confusing to me, and it always just kind of stayed that way in my brain. Like, Evil Dead 2 was kind of a remake of Evil Dead 1, and that's just kind of always the way I looked at it. And that's kind of true, I guess, in a sense. Right. I mean, we'll talk about that as we're going through it. But Army of Darkness, I've definitely seen parts of it, but until we sat down to really watch all these for this show, I hadn't actually seen that one, like,
that is so
really paid attention to.
Yeah, that is nuts.
And I know, it's weird.
That's a
don't know
total
why.
Dan movie.
I know. It's fantastic. So I have no idea why. But hey, I've watched them all now, so we're good.
Yeah. I have a weird, I'm usually really good at remembering how things came to be if they're this important to me. And this is one of those where I don't know when I saw these first. I know it was after. I'm sure it was after Army of Darkness came out. And like you guys said, I saw those posters and everything for that all the time, but I had no idea what it was. And then I can tell you who I saw these movies with, because I had some friends back around then who were real big into the originals to begin with. And I'm sure they would have seen Army of Darkness when it came out, but I'm sure I never saw it in theaters, all but positive. I also tend to try to watch things in order, and I believe that started in childhood. So I'm relatively sure if I knew that Army of Darkness was the third of something, I probably would have watched the other ones first. And I do remember watching it with that group of friends. The thing is, I don't remember if we were 12 or 17, you know what I mean? Like somewhere in that range, I finally got together and sat down and watched through all of these. And like you've hinted on, just the stylistic differences as you're taking that journey, especially when you're not used to the format so much and didn't know anything about it. Like, I liked all of them a lot, but for completely different reasons as you went through.
Yeah.
And then they just became kind of cemented in that, like, Ash is just such a
iconic.
Yeah, exactly. Character, and he goes through. I mean, he's almost 3 different characters in 3 different movies.
He
right
really
there.
is.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And even again, if you count the Ash versus Evil Dead TV series, I feel like he changes again.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Yeah.
And yet always still feels like the same character.
Exactly. That's what kind of what I was getting at. Like it is, but it's also it's always still him, you know.
Yeah.
And like the first one seems like the real outlier from everything that comes later because it's the only one that is grounded in any sort of reality, which is weird to say about that movie.
Right.
But learning about how they came to be and the process behind it. When I did get into these, I was real into finding out how stuff was made and whatever else. And I think I've forgotten more about the history of these movies than I remember probably, but I just remember being so enamored with the amount of underground guerrilla warfare that went into making that first one. And then the way the series progressed from that was always real interesting. And I had the same thing you did about, I had it stuck in my head that 2 was just this weird non-remake of 1, kind of sequel, kind of remake, until we just watched it again for these, and this time it really seemed to flow more like an actual sequel. I think right as we were getting started, I made a comment about it, and you kind of laid out what was about to happen, and after you laid it out, and then I watched it happen, I was like, oh yeah, this does flow way better than I remember it doing, but in my head it was all just one jumbled, like, half recap, half what happens next thing.
Yeah.
Well, I remember, so I following along that, I remember when I first saw the second one, I could not imagine how that was a sequel. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? like the way it started off, I was like, what would have happened in the first movie? But I don't know, it always kind of made sense to me. And when we get to talking about the sequel, Evil Dead 2,
Dead by Dawn, we'll talk a little bit about what that was meant to be and some behind the scenes stuff you were talking about. But let's go ahead and start with the first one. The other thing that's important to note, like with all of this, I don't know that we need to kind of go through and recap the movie so much and just kind of talk about it.
Sure, yeah.
But one of the things about this franchise, I think, is I feel like it's one of those that's also tied very strongly to that kind of, background, like the behind the scenes stuff, and because this first one was made for like $1,600 or something like that, know. Well, actually, I think it was what 90,000.
Yeah, well, I know I read just today the goal was 150 when they were looking for financing, but I don't know if they got to that or not.
But this was, it was shot by essentially a group of 3 friends who kind of found the cheapest local actors, the cheapest local crew, just anybody they could who just wanted to help make a movie, and were intent on kicking it in Hollywood's door however they could, Sure. And I think that has kind of grown, it's like now it's like commonplace, there's all kinds of people who do a thing for YouTube and then make a Marvel movie. You know what I mean? And like it's so commonplace now, but this was like before that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost like this grandfather of geek culture. And then I think that's intrinsically tied to why these movies are a success, because not only was this movie, did it come out and it freaked people out because it was a horror movie and, kind of a different kind of horror movie than anything else we'd seen before.
Right.
But it's also very early, you kind of heard about or that came out that like, oh, this was just like a bunch of 19-year-olds making a movie with their friends.
It's funny the way you make that relation too with like nowadays you see a bunch of people who just do this one thing and then they get a Marvel movie, because Sam Raimi was kind of the grandfather of that guerrilla movie man. And there's other people who have done it, but not quite to that level. Like I've heard stories about, Steven Spielberg basically just conned his way onto a movie set and just took an office job that nobody was paying him for, and then started doing stuff. But that's not the same. This is these guys just going out into the woods and filming this stuff and doing it. And then further ahead, so now he's the grandfather of those guys who just go and get something done and then get these big contracts to make these Marvel movies. And he's also the grandfather of most of those Marvel movies because his giant success went on to be the original Tobey Maguire Spider-Man franchise, which laid the groundwork for a lot of what became like the Marvel system of how they make those movies.
And just make these movies look like the comic book and people will still pay to see it.
Exactly.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
So the first Evil Dead, 1981. Is just it's iconic, it's historic, it's not very good. Can I maybe that's a hot take. Can we just go ahead and put this out there? Like it's the story is rudimentary at best. The effects are choppy at best. Sure. And to the point I feel like I can talk trash about this movie because it comes from a place of love, but this movie is just not all there. And like in 81 even, I feel like how, because it's like, the most terrifying movie in history. Like, really, guys? Like, really? Like I can tell in that one scene she's just spitting out cottage cheese. Like, what are we doing? I know what cottage cheese look like. Yeah.
I'll play counterpoint on that one, and I you're not wrong on any of your descriptions there, but I think it holds up a lot better than the way you're saying it there. That movie does still freak me out just a little bit. And a lot of it is conceptually, they are cheesy effects, especially when you get to the end and all the claymation faces are just melting and all that stuff. Like, clearly that's not exactly the stuff of Nightmares. I'm not sure if it was in 1981 or not, right. But I think it was low budget by any degree. But the earlier stuff, the first half of that movie especially, when you've just got those cameras rushing up at that house and that music playing, and when you've got all these kids who don't know what's going on. The acting's not terrific by any means, but that first time the Deadite shows up and possesses somebody, and all of a sudden their friend is just taken over and all freaky looking and just trying to gnaw them to pieces and tossing them around a room and stuff like that. I still think that is kind of that does get to me on that level a little bit. And again, like you said, the effects may not be top notch, but for all the movies for all the horror movies I've seen from that era, I think it lands right up there with the majority of them. If the effects aren't quite as good as some, I think the shock value makes up for any of that. And I'm still a big fan, even not ironically.
I love all the claymation stuff so much. That's my favorite part. It reminds me so much of Pee-wee and even some of the Beetlejuice stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I love those effects, and I know that they're cheesy.
And all that stuff was years and years later.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. You're right. Those were years after this, and I know that stuff is cheesy by today's standards, especially when CGI is what it is or whatever. But man, I don't know. There's something I'm always gonna love about those more practical effects or the. Yep. I don't know. I love it. I think it looks great. And every time we saw anything like that in that movie, I got so excited. I was like, movies need more stop motion claymation stuff because I love that.
Yeah.
I love it.
No, I agree.
Man, it just doesn't do it for me too much.
That's fair.
I do really like the idea, because so at the time we kind of had horror along two different lines, and probably still to this day you could look at it this way. Mm-hmm. But there's the slasher, because the slasher 81, the slashers were big. We had already had
Halloween, Friday, the first Friday,
those, and there was a bunch of those that were kind of going along that line. And then there was the supernatural, like The Exorcist and Poltergeist, along that lines, where it's a little less gory, right? You know what I mean? It's a little more freaky, and what is the little girl spitting pea soup? You know what I mean? Which scary enough, right? Whatever. But two different ones, and this kind of met them in the middle. This was kind of what if Poltergeist, but everybody dies horribly.
Okay. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So I kind of like
horribly.
I kind of liked that melding. I don't know, just something about, a lot of an actor's face caked in plaster of Paris, I can tell, and it just makes it a little cheesy for me.
Okay,
yeah.
sure.
And it clearly is that, it either is or isn't. And as you said, you can talk about it in that light, but you're still doing it from a place of love.
Yeah, I still love this movie. But yeah, I wonder, if it hadn't gone on to have the other ones, and if Sam Raimi hadn't gone on to be what he was, I just wonder if we would still be talking about Evil Dead today.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which is one of my favorite parts about rewatching the first one is always just wondering, like, when did they decide to just break Ash? Because obviously in this movie he's sort of the everyman protagonist. Starts to lose it a little bit towards the end, obviously, but he never goes.
Yeah.
I mean, he never goes full Ash. He never goes 20% Ash
he plays so
in this movie.
Yeah.
And then you come back to the second one, and all of a sudden it's like 70% Ash. It just goes from 0 to 60, like in the 5-year span, I guess.
Well, I would say one thing about that is I don't think. They weren't making an Ash movie.
Yeah.
They were making a horror movie, and it just happened that Bruce Campbell's our anchor actor.
Yeah.
So he'll have to be the last one to go.
Yeah. And that's and I knew, I had no part during this movie, but I just when they're do they come up with 2 when they get the job for 2? Do they come up with 2 as they're making one? And at one point when they're sitting there writing it, they're like, what if our everyman from the first movie turned into a Looney Tune?
Yeah. I know. It's interesting to see the progression with these, because the first one was so serious and was trying to be just this horrifying, gross, scary movie. And then the second one still has all those elements, but then they just decided to add a bunch of comedy and camp to it.
Yeah.
And then it obviously by Army of Darkness, it's totally shifted that other direction completely.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's I don't know. It kind of makes me wonder, what was their?
I don't know.
What was the decision to make that shift?
Because I don't think there's anything in one that plays as a joke.
I don't think so either.
I laughed when he kept getting thrown into furniture and it fell on him the exact same way every time.
But I don't think that was.
But they weren't. They didn't write it for me to laugh.
Yeah. Bookcases, his only weakness.
Well, yeah. Well, I don't think that. So, I've seen, video essays and stuff. I've seen people talk about how
What's a video essay?
I hate you.
It's a YouTube video.
I hate you.
Oh, okay.
That's what we call it. It makes us sound more distinguished.
I was about to say, yeah. Sounds kind of uppity.
I'm not just making some video about toys. I'm making video essays about toys.
Scholarly.
Yeah, see?
Got it.
See?
Goodness.
Can you get a PhD for those?
I don't think so yet. Yeah, I'm sure there's.
But I can go print one out somewhere.
well, a couple.
Dr. Pixel Dan.
Dr. Pixel Dan.
I was going to say a couple of video essayists have to get old enough to think they can teach somebody how to do it properly.
There you go. Before we get doctorates.
Right. Okay, so what I'm coming to. I've seen some stuff where they compare constructing a horror scene to constructing a joke, and how that's kind of the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I feel like you see a lot of that in the Evil Dead. There's the build up, there's the twist, and then there's the punchline, right? And they do that in all like that happens in any good horror kill, happens in any good joke. So while they weren't specifically funny in the first Evil Dead, that same sort of mentality was still playing through a lot of those
that kind of makes sense.
Scenes. Mm-hmm. Also, there's absolutely no doubt that he was still patterning some of those scenes after Three Stooges routines and Three Stooges episodes. I mean, when Ash is in the basement and everything's dripping blood and everything's leaking, the blood's filling up the light bulb, that's lifted straight from A Plumbing We Will Go. Mm-hmm. which is a Three Stooges one.
Interesting.
A Three Stooges show, yeah.
Huh.
Oh,
yeah. Even the light bulb light.
We didn't know it was blood because it was in black and white.
Whoa, the Three Stooges is way more gruesome.
Yeah, wow. I got to go watch a bunch of that now.
Well, no, even that scene with the light bulb, there's a scene in the A Plumbing We Will Go where a light bulb is filling up with water, just the exact same as we see it fill up with blood. Like, it's lifted specifically, yeah.
Huh.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. The other thing I think needs to be pointed out in your point with, when do we decide Ash is like this guy, right? I feel like there's just a huge progression from movie to movie by Bruce Campbell. Like Bruce Campbell, in the first one, Bruce Campbell is just a 19-year-old kid who's got a little bit of, well, I don't want to say untapped because they're obviously tapping into it, but he's got a little bit of natural charisma.
Yeah.
And in the second one, he is like a full-on performer. And I don't know that he did a ton of stuff in between, but, you get on set those first couple days with him, and you're like, oh, this guy.
Yeah. It's so crazy watching that first movie and seeing little kid Bruce Campbell and hearing his voice that's not quite deepened yet, and like it's so weird.
Yeah, did he wait till like 26 to go through?
I know, right? Because his voice sounds completely different and everything. But then by Evil Dead 2, he looks and sounds like Bruce Campbell. Yeah. It's so weird.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, and that's the point I was going to make up kind of as we went along, too, is he seems more like, when he's doing the everyman role, he seems like the guy who could become the hero. But later on, as he progresses, and he just gets goofier and goofier, but at the same time, like, he's the guy as you go forward. So you would expect that to almost go in reverse. Yeah. Like, he would have to get serious to become the guy jumping into the center of the fight, but it goes completely the opposite of that, and that is kind of that charisma growth, I guess. Yeah. Explains both of those, Like, on the one hand, what does this guy think? And on the other hand, I'm going to get behind this guy if he's between me and a demon, Right.
Yeah. So, shall we move on? Any other thoughts on the first movie?
Well, I guess we should probably talk about some things like the Necronomicon, which is like this is like the kind of our main villain, basically, is the Book of the Dead that they find, and that's the continuing theme with all of the movies that we're talking about. Is that this book is what's basically bringing on these deadites, bringing on the possession, causing all the killing, and it always happens when somebody reads aloud the magic words out of the Book of the Dead, and then boom, it's everything starts over again, and all the killing starts again. And I think it's important to kind of talk about, like, the end of the first one is where he throws it in the fireplace, and that's what ends the whole thing, right?
Well, except it doesn't.
Yeah. Except it doesn't.
That's where he melts thrown in the fireplace, destroys the two deadites that are actively trying to kill him.
Yes. Right. But that's, that's kind of where the movie ends, though, right? Like
Well, but the thing is still coming for him, though. Right. Remember?
They always kind of end that way.
Yeah.
They never.
Well, I think this one's a little more overt about it too, though, because he's got the two deadites are in the process of murdering him. Mm-hmm. He throws the book into the fire. They melt for 20 minutes of claymation.
They explode for part of that.
Yeah. Well, that's my favorite part, because they don't just explode. Giant hands come out. I always thought that was cool to see. A different kind of thing happening. Those hands coming out, like something reaching, like it was trying to hold on, or maybe something pulling them back. Whatever, either way, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But then absolutely we get the chase through the forest that comes through the forest, up through the house, and right up to Ash, and he screams, and then credits.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's a lot of horror movies want to leave it ambiguous, or like, oh, is he gonna get God, or is he gonna? I feel like Ash got God at the end. When they didn't think they were gonna get a sequel. That Ash
the end of that movie was him dying until it wasn't.
Until it wasn't. Yeah.
Cool. And that shot of the camera just flying through the woods with that music and stuff like that, which is another thing they go back to a lot. Mm-hmm. But that gets me sometimes. Not quite cowering in the corner gets me, or whatever. But it always raises the heartbeat a little.
For sure. That's a cool thing. And a cool thing about that from the behind-the-scenes stuff, Sam Raimi invented like 3 or 4 different rigs with what he had at hand to get those shots.
Oh, nice.
That's cool.
Nice, very cool.
They did one that was like they set the camera on a 2x4 basically, and two guys held it at either end and then ran through the forest, so it like smoothed it out enough, but left a little. Cool. Yeah.
Oh yeah, very cool.
Yep. They did some interesting stuff to get it.
It's a great shot, and it's in all of these movies, and it's just so iconic to this franchise that it wouldn't feel the same without it there.
Absolutely,
I love it. Yeah.
And there's a lot of, you could just tell they're experimenting with a lot of this.
Yes.
Yeah.
They do that one shot towards the end where it's like the back of Bruce Campbell's head, but he's upside down, and then the camera just kind of pans around and over, and then like comes back up like to his face or whatever. And that's another one. Like, I don't know that they needed to invent anything for that or whatever, but it was just a really neat shot.
Yeah.
And it didn't play a specific purpose to the happening, but it really added to kind of just the feel of, everything's upside down right now.
Yeah.
And now everything's literally upside down, and then it just kind of got that with the music and everything, and then boom, you're there, and then more insanity happens.
Yeah, I like it.
Cool. So Evil Dead 2.
Dead by Dawn.
Dead by Dawn. So you were kind of talking about you weren't sure how that came to be, how they made that decision.
Mm-hmm.
A little backstory between the movies. So Evil Dead 1 comes out, and they make it, and then it's so horrifying that they can't find anybody in the States who will distribute it. I think they took it to Cannes, and not like Cannes Film Festival, like they went to like Cannes Movie Shop and played it there. And some people saw it, and a couple European, and this isn't specific, this is kind of like broad strokes, right, for everybody who knows more than I do. They found some European distribution companies that would distribute it. And they distribute it, and it starts getting buzz in Britain and Europe, wherever they're showing it. So then American distributors were like, oh, okay, well, this is a thing, let's show it here. Sam Raimi was charged with what's the obscenity? What is that? Creating obscene imagery, something like that. Had to go stand trial for it in in Britain.
Wow.
Yeah. Which I think is, I mean, I guess if you ever want to make more movies, you can't just be like, well, I just won't go to Britain ever again. But I feel like if somebody came to me and they're like, hey, your movie got you charged with obscenity in Britain, I'd just be like, cool, I guess I don't go there anymore. I don't go. Oh, I better go and stand trial for that.
That just seems like a weird thing because he didn't make it there and he wasn't a citizen there. So I could understand them not wanting to show it and outlawing it if that's there, but I don't know how they charge a foreign citizen for making a movie in a foreign land and it getting distributed there. Like, he didn't walk it into movie houses personally.
Right.
If you're going to charge anybody with that, don't you charge the people who are playing it, or distributing it at least or whatever? Weird.
There was also something to do with, because it was also the video release, I think, that got him charged with that, because like the whatever British equivalent of the MPAA or whatever had made them cut 10 minutes out of the movie or whatever. But then when they released it to video, the people who released the videos were just like, nobody from the MPAA is going to watch this or notice, and of course they did.
Yeah.
So
that was such a funny thing for a director, because I could just picture like making a movie and releasing it here, and then somebody being like, hey, we want to sell your movie overseas. Man, all right, cool. And then opening the mail one day and it's like, oh, somebody in Bangladesh wants to put me in prison now. Right. That's weird. Not going to that.
Yeah. But that was a whole big thing, because that was the onset of the video nasties, which was a problem for Clive Barker when he made Hellraiser.
Oh.
So it was this whole big thing where all these videos were like on banned lists and everything because they were graphic and obscene.
Good grief.
But Sam Raimi goes on and, makes some movies. In particular, he makes Crime Wave, which is a big flop for him. And I've never seen it. The things I've seen from it all look like Three Stooges stuff, even though it's supposed to be like this kind of high concept crime story with a love story with an adventure story and some horror elements in it, and just sounds very Sam Raimi, and nobody liked it, and it got a lot of studio interference and had problems, and they wouldn't let him use Bruce Campbell as the main actor and everything, so they were all unhappy with that experience. That's why they decided to go back to the well and make Evil Dead 2. And they knew that there was an audience for it. They knew they could make it for relatively cheap, and they knew it would make money because horror movies make money.
Yeah.
But then they don't make a horror movie. They make the Evil Dead 2 instead.
Yeah.
And so again, we come to the coming back to kind of these crazy rights things. They get Dino De Laurentiis to produce Evil Dead. He did not produce the first one. Well, obviously, nobody produced the first one. They had to create Rosebud Productions, I believe it was called, to have a production company. Because they just went out and found, dentists and lawyers and whoever they could get to contribute money to this thing. They weren't working with a studio system at the time.
Yeah.
So they had invented this Rosebud or whatever. Now they're working with Dino De Laurentiis. They make this movie with the plan of just showing a recap with footage from the first one. And so this movie is intended to start from the moment where Ash gets eaten by the demon at the end, and proceed along that story. They can't get the rights to use that footage. So they have to do this. So they pack the first half with this kind of condensed first few seconds of Ash coming to the cabin with his girlfriend, and she gets possessed right away.
They changed it a little bit because it was just them, those two.
They pulled the other three characters out and they just sort of mashed it together.
Yep. And so it ends up being this, seeming like it's this weird, like, well, did Ash escape and then go back? Because that seems foolhardy.
Yeah.
Or is this a remake? Like, what's the deal? But it's this great movie. I love Evil Dead. As much as I am like, I don't know if Evil Dead works looked at objectively, I love everything about Evil Dead 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't get enough of it.
It's just there's none of the suspense really makes the leap, but like all of the gore.
Yeah.
They turn up the camp, but in the best of ways.
Yes.
They add humor elements to it. Your leading man has grown leaps and bounds, from where he started. Both in leading man qualities and in just general, like performance and overperformance qualities, like the ability to command a scene, even when it's just him yelling at his own hand.
Right. Yeah.
And what's super interesting too is like they have a lot more money to work with on this one because they have an actual studio backing them. And but he's still so they hire all these professional actors and he still steals the scene. You know what I mean? Like it's such a jump for him, like I'm gonna be around all these real actors and man, like you would worry about that considering his biggest credit to that point is this movie we made with whoever we could find.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Lot more. They do a lot more of the claymation in this one.
Yep.
I felt like this was. I feel like this is the one. Everybody thinks of the Evil Dead. They think of this one.
I would agree with that.
That's probably accurate.
Like, This is where
the chainsaw becomes a character.
I was gonna say the chainsaw becomes a character. Yeah, I mean, the whole fight with his evil hand feels like such an iconic Evil Dead thing. You know what I mean? And that scene's amazing.
So are you aware that's also just straight stolen and repurposed?
Nope.
So the guy he worked with, so he actually worked with the guy who made that. There was a guy who had made a short, and I don't know what they did with shorts back then, but it was called, I think the short was called Helping Hand, and it's basically a short that is this housewife battling the hamburger helper hand. What? Yeah, or the hamburger helper glove.
Amazing.
Yeah, I want to see it now.
Yep. I have no idea if you can find it. I'm sure you can.
Yeah, I have the internet. I have the internet. It's got to be out there somewhere.
It's got all the elements. I think it runs and gets caught in a mousetrap at one point, and it gives her the finger, and she tries to smash it and does all this stuff. And Sam Raimi, I saw the guy interviewed. And the guy says, I made this little short. I was trying to get noticed for my special effects and stuff. And I get a call from Sam Raimi, and he says he saw my short, and he just wants to use that and wants me to come do it. And so we did it with Ash's Evil Hand.
Nice.
That's incredible.
Well, they did a short before they did the first one, too.
Yes.
Yeah, they did a short film to prove that they could make a feature length and to try to get some financing from it that they shopped around.
In the woods? Into the woods?
Within the woods, I think.
That sounds right. Yeah.
Huh.
Yep.
Cool.
Which my understanding is it's basically just a short version of The Evil Dead.
Yes, and they would take that around to their investors. And I heard one of them, probably Bruce Campbell, talking about how they'd call up these investors or these dentist lawyers or whatever and be like, oh yeah, we talked to Dr. So-and-so, and he said, he knew he couldn't invest, but he thought you might be interested in it. And they'd be like, yeah, we don't want to. And be like, well, we just like to come around and show you we have a small film we made, our proof of to show you kind of what we're going to do on a bigger scale. And they're like, yeah, but we really don't want to do that kind of thing. It's like, oh, great. Well, we'll be there around 8:30. You can just see our, and they're just like, they just show up and these people, play this movie on their kitchen wall, whatever, where they could find a flat enough space to do it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, so the Evil Hand's great. I love that entire scene.
Yeah.
Like he cuts it off, and then it's just running all over the place. Does the mousetrap thing, flips him off. It's insanity, and I love it.
I love it when it's still attached and it's just dragging him across the floor, just like by the fingertips.
Oh, that part where he's like knocked out.
Yeah.
And it's like just dragging, trying to get to. Yeah.
Well, also, has there ever been, we've seen plenty, and probably most of them are takes off of this, but plenty of times somebody gets their own hand trying to attack them, or they're trying to hold back, it's got a knife or whatever. Has anybody ever done it as well as Bruce Campbell in that scene?
Not even.
Yeah,
Devin Sawa made a whole movie like that, and it was not as good.
And that was Devin Sawa.
I love how much of that movie is Ash just losing his mind by himself in the cabin.
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's so much of it.
Yeah.
It's like just like the biggest chunk of that movie is just him going bananas by himself. All the laughing and like you said, he's like a Looney Tune basically in this movie.
Well, it makes you feel like you wonder if there was how much relief that character would have felt when other people did show up, because it's like, oh well, now you guys are in the way and you're all definitely going to die and try to kill me when you get possessed. But at least I know it's actually happening now.
Yeah.
Like it's not just me losing it in the woods.
And then the entire like transformation into like hero Ash is so amazing. But like that really does feel like the moment where it's like, oh, now we've just totally flipped over into this is what we're doing now.
Yep.
Okay, this is what we're doing. Because there's that whole scene where he saws off the shotgun, he attaches a chainsaw to his stump. I mean, it's insanity. It is totally insane.
Too, they even had the wherewithal to build that little clip like on his arm so he could hook the thing in there so he could just start it like going like that or whatever. I'm like, they put some real thought into that in the 20 seconds they were trying to not get attacked by demons and put this whole thing together.
Right.
Got the holster on his back for his boomstick, and it's amazing, dude. He's got the one sleeve ripped off. He's looking all buff. It's amazing though, because that whole scene when that's happening, it really does just feel like the movie has taken this total turn at that point. It's like, wow, we have really, really just shifted into the absurd at this point. But I love it.
Well, and we talked last week, when we were talking about Psycho, how Psycho was like 2 movies put together, almost 3 movies like into one, like in a very deranged version of that same concept. Like that, there is this is the moment where this goes from like, this is kind of like Evil Dead, but it's a little over the top. Yeah. And then you're like, oh, this isn't even Evil Dead.
It's not even Evil Dead anymore.
It's its own thing now.
Any questions?
Yeah. Well, and the chainsaw? Part of it.
Part of it.
I think, though, there's a little bit of that is... And I don't know exactly how I want to say this, but you watch so many horror movies, and even if you're into horror, and even if you realize this is just not part of the genre, like there's so often you're just like, okay, why doesn't somebody just grab a baseball bat and go to town with Jason Voorhees?
Sure, yeah.
Like I feel like I would do that before I'd run away and let him step out in front of me and chop me with whatever. There's this baseball bat right here. Let's go heads up and see who wins. And so this is a horror movie where horrible stuff is happening the whole time, and then finally the one guy's like, all right, you know what? I'm going to stick this chainsaw in my hand, and we're going to go heads up and see who survives.
Chainsaw hand. Here we go.
Yeah. So, like, there's that kind of cathartic, let's do it. Let's throw it out.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go down. I'm going to go down in a way no one would ever believe.
Right. So, and I think that's probably part of the reason... Something that makes it different, you know what I mean?
Right.
This could have easily have just been because once other people show up, it really falls back into the first Evil Dead. It falls right back into all those. There's somebody chained in the basement. Everybody gets like a nick. They get wounded and then they turn into a devil or a demon, whatever, a deadite. They turn into a deadite, and we gotta chop them up. But not before they hurt somebody else, who then immediately turns into a deadite, and you got to chop them up. So it's kind of just like this. It's right back to the same old stuff. And just when you're like, well, this could easily just become the first one again, they just go all the way bananas.
Yep.
And Ash is like, all right, chainsaw hand, sawed off shotgun. I'm gonna fight I'm gonna fight a stop motion dragon, and then we're gonna open a hole in space and time.
Yeah.
And we're all gonna get sucked back into the Middle Ages.
Man. Well, that's another thing too that I was kind of surprised by watching it this time. I didn't realize that they set up Army of Darkness so thoroughly that midpoint in the movie, they were looking in the Book of the Dead, and there's a drawing of Ash with a chainsaw hand standing around a bunch of knights.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
I forgot about that too.
Yeah, because the lady even says something like, "Oh, that's the chosen one."
Yeah.
He was prophesized to stop
They call him the hero from the sky.
Yeah, the hero from the sky. So they set that whole thing up, and I thought that was really cool that they had that planned out so much already.
Yeah. I would say if I were an evil book, I don't think I would write about the guy who was meant to stop me in myself.
That's fair. That's fair. Although they never really talk about who wrote that book. So
it almost seems like it's a collection of
It mentions the Sumerians.
Yeah.
I remember that because I immediately just flashed back to Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
Because they even I know they get into it a little bit more in the remake, but there's stuff is in that book that talks about stopping the Deadites or because there's the instructions in there about how to turn somebody back and stuff like that, and that whole opening scene. I know I'm jumping way ahead, but there's the whole opening scene where they burn the girl to kill off the Deadites, and that's in the book.
Oh,
it tells them to do it in the book. So that book does have stuff like that in it.
Yep.
So I always just kind of assumed it's a collection of things that people have written about this terrible, I don't know.
Yeah.
This evil.
Well, and the other thing too that is that passage where they reference Ash is in those the lost pages. Remember, because the
that's
daughter
right.
shows up with
That's
the lost pages.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they call them the whole time the lost pages of the Book of the Dead.
Yeah.
Right. So they just imply that they were torn out or whatever.
Yeah.
Except they look totally different than all the other pages in the book.
Uh-huh.
And that's probably just my own little headcanon kicking in a little bit.
Sure.
But they do look totally.
But if it is pieced together over time or whatever, then that makes sense anyway.
Yep,
So.
Huh. Okay.
Yep.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Yeah, so then that movie ends with a portal to space-time opening up and Ash and his car getting sucked away.
Yeah.
So, if that movie couldn't go any more bananas,
right.
It ends with him just dropping into the Middle Ages.
Well, and I've always really enjoyed the end of that. There's just something, and I don't know what it is, but there's just something so, man... relatable to me. Like I feel it, because he drops into the Middle Ages and there's all these knights around and they're about to kill him, but then a deadite comes flying in and he just stands up and shoots it with his shotgun, and it falls down, whatever. And then all the knights start like, hail, heels, come from the sky, and they're all like cheering him. But they have that like slow pan back where he's like realizing what's going on, and he's like, oh no, no. And I don't know, there's just something like I feel that like everything he went through, and like that realization of like, I'm sucked back in time. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. I feel that.
I don't want to be the chosen one from the sky.
Right, as like this perfect bit of horror to end on. It's even worse than like just have gotten killed by the Necronomicon. You know what I mean? Like
totally.
Or the Deadites. Just like, oh my, I don't know. I always felt that.
Yeah, for real.
Which brings us to Army of Darkness. So. Now, the middling story of Army of Darkness, they're all super famous now. They're all making other movies.
Well,
they're all doing stuff.
Okay,
they're all doing stuff.
Okay.
They're
all actively working.
They're all established now. Sam Raimi gets tapped to make the most anticipated movie of '92, Darkman.
Oh, 90?
90?
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
I think it's before this, I think.
It was definitely before this.
So
that's the thing. So he makes Darkman, and again,
91?
The studio decides that they are going to mess with everything he does and change his final cut, as they do.
Yep.
He loses, control of the picture at the end, has another really bad experience, and Sam Raimi wants to go back to the well, somewhere where he feels safe, and
even though he gave us Liam Neeson.
He was unhappy with how that experience had ended, so he goes back to do Army of Darkness, a third Evil Dead. They make the movie. They are working with Universal now, and they make some deal. Dino De Laurentiis and Universal make some deals. They're all going to work together. They're really happy. They shoot this movie that is long and grueling and just a horrible process. Because apparently, watching all these makings of, apparently making movies is just horrible. So especially if there's more than like basic makeup, so the lights reflect off your skin properly. Every movie is just the most awful thing you can ever want to do. That's what I've taken from learning about the Evil Dead movies.
Yeah, 1990.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. So they get Army of Darkness shot and finished and cut, and Universal goes, thanks, and then sets it on the shelf for over a year because they are in a legal battle with Dino De Laurentiis, because they are making Silence of the Lambs, and Dino De Laurentiis made Manhunter. So he thinks he owns film rights to Hannibal Lecter.
Okay.
So actually, and side note, Army of Darkness and Cuffs were both finished, cut, edited movies, placed on hold for like over a year while Universal and Dino De Laurentiis decided this legal battle over Hannibal Lecter.
And that's what stalled out Christian Slater's career? Imagine where he'd be if Cuffs hadn't sat there for a year. Sky would have been the limit.
I don't know if that's... Yeah, whatever. Whatever. I'm not even gonna engage with that.
It's probably for the best.
Army of Darkness, we have completely abandoned even the pretenses of making a horror movie.
No joke.
And this is just a full-on adventure film.
Yeah.
More akin to Jason and the Argonauts.
I was going to say, it's a total, like, swords and sorcery type of flick.
Yep.
Yeah. With a chainsaw and a boomstick.
Yeah. Ash stuck back in time. And, it always
seems... had at least one blood Kano.
There was one blood Kano.
Yep.
There's a weird... I always thought it was kind of weird, and I guess it doesn't matter that he went back to... Because, like, I don't know if Kandar is a real place, but they're always referenced as Kandarian demons. They talked about ancient Samaria and stuff. So like it always seemed weird that because those are not the Middle Ages.
Yeah,
that he ended up in the Middle Ages with a knight named Arthur, and like fighting the. Not the movie to nitpick something like that, obviously, but sure. It just always seemed kind of weird to me. Once I saw the.
Yeah. It's just there's a point where there just are no rights or wrongs anymore.
Yeah.
Yep. So.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I don't have a lot to say about this movie. It disappoints me that. We get the scene in the beginning where. He's been enslaved, and they throw him into a pit to get eaten by a couple deadites, and then not Merlin throws him his chainsaw.
So they changed it a little bit, right? Because from the end of the end of Evil Dead 2, they were all like, "Yeah, all hail this guy that fell from the sky to save us." But at the beginning of this movie, the king was just straight up like, "Nah, that dude's totally with the other army.
Yeah,
lock him up. We're gonna kill him right now." And then that's just like how it starts. So.
Well, so it's sort of the reverse, right? So like the middle one is this hub of reality, and like the first movie is an expansion of like the first 3 minutes of Evil Dead 2, and Army of Darkness is like an expansion of the last 3 minutes of Evil Dead 2.
Totally. That's funny. Yeah. So he gets locked up, and then they drop him in that well, which is where there's deadites apparently.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then not Merlin shows up, throws him down his chainsaw hand.
Yeah. Well, we get the hero shot where he jumps up and clicks into it,
catches it.
Yeah, and then kills both the deadites with his chainsaw hand.
I love it.
But then almost right away he makes a mechanical gauntlet hand.
Yeah. And
then the chainsaw is just not a factor in the rest of the movie.
I know.
And like I'm always so disappointed that when we get to like the final big sword fight, there's no point where he puts the chainsaw back on and wins the sword fight with the chainsaw. Like that feels tailor-made for that movie, and they just skip over it.
Super weird. Wow.
Also, that dude was years ahead in the prosthetics game. Yeah, what was he doing working at a convenience store?
Sure. Yeah, so that's some stuff that they kind of set up with Ash in this one that feels very different from the others, because we get that small recap from him at the beginning of this one where he kind of recaps a combination of Evil Dead 1 and 2, which is kind of neat. Yep. But he adds in that whole thing like, well, I was just a regular guy. I was working at this store, S-Mart. And then we see all this stuff we'd never seen before of Ash being just this goofy retail worker, which is just kind of what we were talking about earlier. It feels like that evolution of the character where he has morphed again still feels the same, but seeing him as this... Like, that's what he was before the first Evil Dead movie, supposedly. Yeah. But that doesn't fit with the character from the first Evil Dead at all.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
This thing only clocks in at like 81 minutes.
Yeah.
Like it's super short.
Super short.
And it's one of those, and I'll say, and I love this movie, so I'm not downplaying it in any way, shape, or form, but that's one where I always think 81 minutes seems so short. I could probably use a little bit more of this as much as I love it. And I think, I don't know that this movie could survive 86 minutes. I really don't. I think this might be right in its wheelhouse, it's perfect right here. And if it was like 98 or whatever, I think it might have just been overplayed.
Yeah. And there are extended versions you can find with extra time in the extra time when he's in the windmill. Fighting the little hymns.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of there's like 5 extra minutes of that, which I don't ever want to see. And I know there's a ton of extra footage from the big battle at the end, because apparently Sam Raimi just loved blowing up those skeleton puppets.
Oh,
so
I can only imagine. Yeah.
I love those skeleton puppets. That entire end scene is amazing.
So a couple. So one of the things we hear about is Ash, Bruce Campbell. They let him do a lot of his own stunts in these movies. Mm-hmm. Not all of them, obviously. But
I'm not sure if he used the word "let him."
Right. But there's a common thread in all these movies of like Sam Raimi just wants to torture Bruce Campbell as much as he can. And one of the notable things that I noticed in watching doing my research for this episode, they all talk about there's a moment in Army of Darkness where Ash is running through a cemetery. He falls over, and all these skeleton hands start smacking him in the face and pulling his cheeks and whatever. And a few cast members mentioned that was the first time they'd ever seen that they shot that, and Sam Raimi just kept going and smack him with this, pull it with this, hit him with this. And they said that they reached a point where Bruce went, "Hey, buddy, I think we got it. I'm done with this." And they were like, that's kind of the first time we'd ever seen that happen. And Bruce Campbell got up and walked away from that shot. So that was always one of my less appreciated moments in the movie. And I don't know, it's just like it almost just gets a little too goofy. Because it is. It's just like a hand comes in and grabs his face, and he's like, gosh, and there's no reason he can't use his hand to put it away, but he does. He blows it away, and then one comes in and fish hooks him from one side, and then one fish hooks him from the other side, and they poke him in the eyes, but then he tries to block it, so they come in from the side, and it's just like, and I'm like, what are we doing? This is not,
Yeah, it's super.
This is just.
Well, it's probably about what happened is he was like, I'll just push this as a joke. We probably won't even use this scene.
Oh, for sure.
And they pushed it, and then he legitimately upset Bruce Campbell, and then they got to the editing room and was like, maybe I should act like we really needed that. What are we clocking in? What are we clocking in at right now? Anyway, 80 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, let's just put in 2 minutes of this then. And then
For sure. We get Evil Ash. I feel like Evil Ash, the concept of Evil Ash became more iconic to the series than the Evil Ash monster.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, I feel like I hear, I'm bad Ash,
yeah,
and you're good Ash,
yeah,
way more than I hear any other line or see the image of that monster.
Sure.
Well, because I mean, it doesn't need to be Evil Ash anymore after that scene.
Right.
It can just be like the head monster.
Yeah.
There's nothing else that plays it back into being like his other half or anything like that.
Even though Bruce Campbell definitely played that monster. But yeah, he was absolutely pointless for him to play it and unnecessary for it to be Evil Ash beyond that point. I've always felt like when I first saw that movie, before I knew it was part of Evil Dead, I always felt like I just enjoyed the comedy and the kind of sword and sorcery setting, and like, why has he got a chainsaw hand? I don't know, because it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. After seeing it, once I know about it in context, I feel like there is a lot of missed
opportunity.
Yes,
yeah.
A lot of missed plot, a lot of missed opportunity. Like it should have mattered that Ash was the chosen one who fell from the sky, right?
Yeah.
But there was a good one and an evil one. It should have mattered that how could he not? Like I said, how could he not go back to chainsaw fight? Here he is in medieval times, and trying to sword fight, and this evil monster is going to kill him in this sword fight. How could he not go back to throw me the chainsaw?
Yeah, totally. Man, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, they totally. The kind of not love interest, but she gets kidnapped and turned into an evil witch, but then unevils as soon as they blow up the head bad guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like all of that just means nothing and goes nowhere. And they don't even destroy, they blow up the head bad guy. It's not like they destroy the Necronomicon or break the spell. They just blow him up and then she's fine, which is not how it has ever worked in any of the other movies. I just feel like there was a lot, I almost feel like Sam Raimi got in his own way on this one, and like he could have made, like he was just like, nobody's gonna stop me from making this, let's just spend 10 minutes in the cemetery smacking Ash with books and bats and fake skeletons,
Sure.
I got all this money for a Jason and the Argonauts army of skeletons. I'm going to spend, 2/3 of my time shooting that. And, I can't blame him, and I've never been the one going, man, I've got all this continuity that I could tie into this, but also I'd rather just have fun making this movie because Darkman was terrible. So I don't know, but I feel like there's a lot of missed opportunities on it.
But there's probably a perfect version of this movie in some parallel dimension that's got all that stuff in it, and there's this version which is perfect for what we love it for. So for sure.
There's we live in the darkest timeline.
No, I'm saying there's a lot of parallel dimensions that have versions of that movie that are somewhere in between, and not a single one of those work at all.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Well, it's super funny that you bring up that, because I want to go ahead and present my own little headcanon here before we move on to the last movie.
I want a headcanon.
Well, and actually, I'm going to move here. So there's also Ash versus the Evil Dead.
Yeah.
Which is a series, 3-season series, that continues Ash's story, right? We watched the first episode.
We did, yeah.
Which I highly recommend. If you're a fan of these movies or haven't heard of these movies or are watching any, in anything you do regarding these movies, if you don't feel like committing to three seasons of a series, I get it. Watch the first episode, because the first episode really, to me, feels like the fourth movie. Mm-hmm. It's satisfying. It ends on a satisfying enough note, even though it's left open to continue the series. It's not like left on a real cliffhanger.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You get kind of all that, you see Ash being Ash and not wanting to fight the Evil Dead when they start popping back up. But then he has to, and he gets, he comes back to the chainsaw. We get another great hero scene where somebody throws in the chainsaw and he dives in and locks the stump into it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Amazing.
I think it's funny that he's running around with like a wooden hand instead of that prosthetic that he put together in 20 minutes with medieval technology.
Yeah. Okay, so coming to that, in that continuity, even in the show when he does the recap, that show he does not go back in time.
He leaves out the Army of Darkness stuff he didn't even bring up in that
recap. Fair enough.
So he escaped. In Ash and the Evil Dead, he did not get sucked into the vortex.
In my heart, he did.
Yeah.
So that's fine, but that's what I'm coming to, because in my headcanon, all these movies happen in a different universe, parallel universes.
It's a multiverse thing.
It's a multiverse, because in each version, the Necronomicon is different.
Yeah.
So they're all different versions of the Necronomicon and how that story has gone differently in my headcanon.
Yep. Which works out fine with the remake, sequel, remake,
into the Asherverse,
whatever it is.
Yes.
Before, I don't know if we're moving on to that. Before we move on to that, we should bring out the alternate ending for Army of Darkness, though. Okay. You guys have seen that, haven't you?
Yeah.
That's one of those. Oh, you haven't? Oh. Well, spoiler alert.
You should have watched it. No, that's
Dan,
okay.
Yeah, my bad. There was a collector's edition or whatever that came out in like the late 90s or something like that. I think that was the first time it was released, like easily accessible, because that was back before you had YouTube where you could just find everything on the internet.
Right.
But they always talked about how there was a different ending for that movie, and it was actually like one of those exciting things to find and finally see. But basically, at the end, he's supposed to drink like 2 drops of this potion or whatever to get back to the normal time, and at the end of the movie he does, and he comes back, and Army of Darkness ends with him at the S-Mart explaining the story to somebody.
Yeah.
And then another Deadite attacks in modern times again, and he's all kind of back into the action. Well, in the alternate version, he does the, can't remember the 3 words thing, where he's like, how many drops of this am I supposed to take or whatever? And so he ends up taking like 10 instead of 2 or whatever, and he wakes up like way into this dystopian future where the Deadites have taken over the world, and he's all bearded and whatever. He's not older, he's just all bearded, and so he slept through like his time and however many years or centuries or whatever, and he just wakes up now, and now he's way too far into the future and is stuck there with Deadites running running
Oh
free
my
around the
God.
world. Yeah,
Amazing.
it's insane.
Yeah, it's a wild one. So that brings us to the real reason I wanted to make this episode.
For real, this is the real reason you wanted to make this episode.
Because
You've been talking about this remake for so long.
This I say with no hyperbole. I think this is the best remake reboot of all of them.
Yeah.
I think it is like any not horror any reboot that has been done has not been done as well as the Evil Make reboot from 2013.
I don't feel like there's any doubt to that. I'm sure the comment section can give me 100 examples that make me go, yeah, maybe. But off the top of my head right here and now, I can't think of another one that comes close.
Yeah. This movie is probably top 3 horror movies for me.
Really?
Yeah.
Nice.
I love this movie so much.
It encompasses what a reboot should be, because it is not just, well, we saw the first one, let's just kind of make that again with modern special effects or whatever, or this thing was popular, so the studio wants another one, so we can have, this is really like they went back to like the original concept and the original script and went, okay, instead of taking all the old characters and moving to, it would have been so easy for them to make the original Evil Dead, but a little goofier and with the Army of Darkness style Ash character and the chainsaw hand and all of that stuff, like right there in the beginning. But instead they went back and went, conceptually, this movie with a little bit of, money and a little bit more experience going into it, conceptually this thing could have been absolutely epically terrifying.
Yeah.
Let's go make that movie.
Yeah, absolutely. This movie brings the seriousness back to the whole thing. And, because this is just straight up a horror movie.
Yes.
With just, it's gross.
Yep.
And it's terrifying. And it goes straight back, like you guys were saying, to the roots of, well, let's just throw these people in this cabin with this Book of the Dead and then watch the demons do terrible things to them. Mm-hmm. And that's totally the core of this movie. It's got the spirit of the original. And it's cool because they're completely different characters. Mm-hmm. So they are not even the same characters. But there are a lot of nods in this movie that aren't direct remakes of like scenes that happen in the original, but things that are like there for you as a fan to go, oh, that's cool. That's totally a nod to this, or that totally ties into stuff that's happened in the previous ones. But it stands on its own as its own thing. Mm-hmm. It's its own movie. You don't have to know anything about Evil Dead. You don't have to have a love for this franchise. You can go in and watch this movie, and it is a good, scary, gross horror movie.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a great sign of a good remake, a good way to remake or reboot a franchise.
Well, I think it's so interesting. Last week we watched the remake of Psycho.
Yes.
Which was a shot-for-shot remake for the most part.
Yeah.
And yet this still somehow captured the spirit and all the elements of the original Evil Dead better than the remake of Psycho did,
Hands
making
down.
a shot-for-shot remake.
Hands down.
Right,
it's amazing.
Right.
And, one of the things that's been kind of a cool theme with this year's movies that we're watching is we've watched remakes for all of these movies already. And it's really interesting seeing the contrast between how each of these remakes were handled. And the Psycho one is just like the most insane example because they literally went into that movie and said, we're just going to remake the original Psycho shot for shot, line for line, but it's modernized. And it was terrible. Terrible. There's just no reason not to watch the original movie.
Right.
And then this does something completely different where they make a brand new movie, but it's just got the spirit of the original. And it's done so perfectly that, like you said, it's like even though Psycho was shot for shot the same thing as the original, this captures the spirit of the original Evil Dead so much better. Mm-hmm. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. And it has all, it has all the scenes you would want revisited.
Yeah.
Right? It's got the kind of demon flying through the forest
They
shots.
still do that shot,
It's got somebody trapped in the, chained in the basement.
Man, they even do the vines
looking
again.
up through the door.
They even do the vines again,
They even
and
do the
probably
vines
more
again.
terrifying than they've done in any of them.
Well,
sure.
I also had to laugh because I was watching that thinking, remembering John's comment about, well, we could just watch the first Psycho and go, what if this, but worse? And that's definitely what they did with this movie, only in the right way.
In the right way. Yeah, totally.
What if the scene from the first Evil Dead, but way, way worse?
Like the parallels between the two there, because like Psycho was already pretty much a perfect movie, and then they're like, well, why don't we just do it again? And it didn't work at all. Whereas this one was like, they meant very well, and parts of it worked very well, but it was very limited by time, budget, all of that stuff. What if we make this one again, but do it better?
Yeah.
And you actually can, and they actually put the heart into doing that and sticking with the spirit rather than just ho-humming through something that they used to study.
Right.
I love the visuals in this movie, as gross as they are.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie makes you cringe and makes
my goodness.
I had to avert my eyes multiple times in this movie because it's that gross.
Yeah.
But one of the things about this,
we wanted to.
right?
We wouldn't let ourselves the first time we saw it.
It's one of those things where
if I'm watching the tongue thing, you're watching the tongue thing. Okay.
I was going to say the scene that I remember we were watching it the other night, and it was the bathroom scene where the girl's cutting her face
man.
off.
Yeah.
Because you see that they flip to that page in that book,
They warn you like 3
and
times
they
it's
warn
coming.
you that it's coming, and then that you hear that scene coming, and I was like, oh no, she's cutting her face off, isn't she? And it gets to that scene, and I was like, I don't want to watch this, but I do want to know, but I don't want to see this, but I kind of want to see this. And then there she was, just sawing her face off with a piece of glass, and then that dude walks in and slips on her cheek that's on the floor.
Yep.
It's awful. It's so awful.
So
but
good.
what I'm getting to is with the visuals, one of the things that really does stand out, and it's another one of those things that's always going to make me support this, the only CGI in this movie was for some of the fire to make the fires look bigger.
Nice.
Other than that, this was all practical
Oh my goodness,
effects.
that's crazy.
And that
Even the
just
tongue
makes
thing?
all the difference.
Even the tongue thing.
Oh, wow.
It really does make a difference. And I was even kind of reading some stuff online how a lot of people were terrified of this remake because they were worried about it being a CGI fest. Because that really, we talked about it with It when we were watching it.
Yep.
Part 2, way cranked up the CGI, and it did kind of cheapen it sometimes. And so in this movie, these effects were just brutal.
Yeah.
They were brutal. And so knowing that they really did all this
I didn't realize
crazy-
it was. I knew there was a lot of practical. I didn't realize everything was practical. These guys deserve all the Oscars.
So even though I was reading, because even though this director, what's his name?
Fede Alvarez.
So he's known for his really good CGI effects, but he specifically refused to use CGI in this because he wanted to follow Sam Raimi's footsteps and do practical effects. I think that's awesome.
I feel like horror is not served by CGI.
It's not.
As good as it is now.
Yeah.
There needs to be some visceral feel to the practical effects. CGI. Turn my superhero movie, turn my Fast and the Furious movie, turn that into a cartoon. I'm good with it.
That's what I was about to say. It is great now. You can do some cool and scary stuff with it now. But especially if you're using it loosely, it always has that cartoon polish to it.
Yes.
Always. And that does work great for a superhero, and it does work fine for muscle cars versus tanks.
Right.
It does not work for horror if it's overdone. You can sprinkle it in here and there, but you overdo it, and it just takes you out of that realm.
Totally. Yeah.
There's nothing scary about the Roadrunner.
So I also want to bring up the story because there's so many. You just accept with horror that okay, these guys are going to ignore obvious problems, and they're going to run upstairs when they should run out the front door. That's just the thing we accept with horror movies, right?
Sure.
They do such a good job of. Because they're all out there for Mia, who is a heroin addict.
Yep, recovering addict.
And so she's going to cold turkey heroin, and you have to get through 72 hours, something like that, for the physical addiction to be over. Now the mental is an ongoing thing, whatever. But so they always sit with somebody. That's like a thing. Sure. So they come out here to do that with her. To get away from city where she can't run and go give up and run into somebody. And, this is the second time they've tried it, so they're all kind of deciding that they're going to keep her there. So it's like this perfect reason why one person can be losing their mind and swearing they're seeing things and, they got to go, and everybody else is going, no, we're going to stick this one out. We gotta stick this out. Instead of just having to have that horror suspension of disbelief, like, well, if they just go call the cops, then we don't have a movie.
Yeah. It's genius.
Yeah,
I think it's genius.
It's such a good.
I mean, because you've even got the scene too, like where because she's flipping out because she can smell something dead in the house.
Yeah,
and they're like, "You're losing your mind. No, this is just part of it. Calm down." And then they find the cellar. Yeah. They find the fruit cellar with all the dead cats in it. Dead cats hanging in there. But even at that point, because she's like, no, you guys are crazy. I'm getting out of here. But they're still kind of like, all right, so there's dead cats. Okay, sorry. But you didn't see anything outside. No. You didn't see anything outside. Right. Yeah. So like it's cool because like it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and they don't believe her until they all start dying.
Yeah.
Yep. Now I do got to say that's early enough into the process where I find a basement full of dead cats and I'm throwing my junkie friend in the trunk and we're going back to civilization. And if it doesn't stick this time, we'll try it again.
Yeah.
I
love how they're just.
We're not at hour 70. We're at hour 3. We're leaving.
They just make that guy go get all his dead cats out of the basement and like throw them in the trash can.
And by himself.
Yeah. What a terrible job. Like,
you got it.
No thanks.
That's the other part. 'Cause you guys would be like, go take care of those. And I'm like, nope.
No. Can we just put the rug back over
I will sit here and smell them for 3 days before I touch one.
Well, the other thing too is, and the other problem, maybe the only moment where I'm like, they made a mistake, because when they pull that rug off the trap door leading into the basement, there's like a huge blood smear into the basement, right?
Yeah,
it's not like that's not. And somebody the door put their hand in and clean it up.
Yeah. And the door had been broken into and everything when they got there too, because that's what the time that they do make that mistake is when you're like, someone came here and murdered a bunch of cats after breaking in. We don't know when that was. Probably wasn't yesterday, but might have been last week, and he might still be living in the woods.
Maybe he's out collecting some more cats.
Yeah.
If he comes back, I don't want to be here. But this movie is so good, and they get to the end, and they pull the big swerve at the end, and I think the end is really what puts it over the top to me.
It's so good
because they get to the end, and we read in the book earlier that there's this prophesied, once the book consumes 5 souls, the behemoth will appear, right?
Yeah,
and. Man, they get to the end, and it seems like David and Mia are going to escape, and David has totally been set up as like our Ash.
Yeah, totally, because Mia was the one that was possessed and locked in the cellar the whole time, and she was like kind of controlling all of the chaos that was happening.
Yep.
But he was able to fix her.
Right.
He was able to get her unpossessed.
Yep. So he cleansed her.
Yep.
And they're about to leave, but then their other friend, the friend they thought was dead, is a deadite.
Yeah.
And David has to blow them both up in the cabin.
Yeah.
With Mia outside. And just that moment of like, okay, well, and that feels like such a, because these movies are always like happy ending. Oh, here's the swerve horror ending.
I know.
And so that moment feels like such the like, oh, well, there was a swerve horror ending, and how many movies I could see it easily being like, big explosion, she stumbles back watching the cabin burn, credits.
Yeah, yeah.
But instead of credits, it starts raining blood.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the behemoth crawls up out of the earth, and it's such a great scene. This whole scene, this behemoth chases her around and tries to kill her, and it's raining blood the whole time, and it's this capstone. She gets her hand, it flips the Jeep over on her.
Man.
Yeah.
And she gets her hand stuck under the Jeep.
Well, we get the scene right before that though, where she runs into the garage.
Okay,
we get the great fan service moment because she goes in there to grab a weapon, and then she looks up and sees the chainsaw.
Yes.
And she grabs the chainsaw, and that was real cool because you're like, yes, here we go. So then we get the Jeep scene, which is oh man, that thing flips that Jeep over and it lands on her arm.
Yeah, and she rips her
own hand off. Oh, that scene is brutal.
And she becomes our Ash at that moment.
Man.
And it's again it's that satisfying catharsis. Because she's had enough.
Yeah.
And she even says, "I'm sick of this."
Yeah.
Rips her hand off, grabs the chainsaw.
She shoves her hand through the handle of it, which is like, oh, this is fantastic.
She shoves her stump.
Yes. Shoves her stump through the handle of the chainsaw where you're like, okay, that's great. That's good stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, and then she just saws that thing in two.
Man.
Yeah. That thing is amazing.
Like, because she cut its legs off first and gets that crawling at her,
Well, that's when it was, that's because it flipped the Jeep off. She was hiding under the Jeep.
Yeah, that's right. So it had already done that, and then it flips it over. That's right, And it's just crawling at her, and she's got that, man, because it's not even that she just saws it in half. She just stabs that thing through the mouth with it, and Bloodcano again. And like the imagery of that with that
peel in half, laying on the ground.
Well, just when they have that shot on the side of it there with that chainsaw going right through that thing's mouth and just spewing everywhere or whatever. It was so cool.
So good.
It was amazing.
And then it stops raining blood. She has defeated the Deadites, and she hobbles off into the forest. She definitely died hobbling through the forest, right? Like, there is no way she made it back.
There's no way she didn't bleed out from ripping her arm off.
Let's say, it was 2013? I'd say we'll find out within 3 to 5 years here.
Depending on how it goes. Yeah.
Well,
if we definitely don't get another one before that, because they keep talking about making more.
Well, we definitely are getting another one.
Are we?
It's called Evil Dead Rise.
Is it still Mia?
It's not Mia.
Oh, okay.
It's
interesting.
Not. So Bruce Campbell has talked a lot about it, and I've even seen like interviews he's done during the pandemic. So like that hasn't changed anything yet. He did the 3rd season of Ash vs. Evil Dead. And he says that's the end of Ash. Ash is over. Ash is retired. He won't do it again.
Yeah.
No,
he has said that before.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
But
let's talk about that little teaser at the end of this one too. It wasn't really we didn't know if it was a teaser or what it was at the time. But when they roll the credits on this one after she goes hobbling off into the woods, and the credits roll for a while, and towards the end you get the recording. It was the same recording from the first one, wasn't it? Yeah,
same recording.
So you get the recording from the first one of the doctor or the professor or whatever reading the some of the words from the Necronomicon or whatever, and then that goes away. And then once the final credit rolls, you get this silhouette of a profile of Ash, of Bruce Campbell. Looking up and just going groovy, and then like he just stares at the screen and then pops off. Great. And this is several years before they made Ash versus the Evil Dead.
2 years before.
Was it only 2?
Yeah, okay. 2015 is when Ash vs. Evil Dead launched.
So I don't remember that being like an official thing at the time, because I remember all the speculation was, well, did that mean anything? Are they going to make more? Is Ash going to move into this? Then there was some speculation of like, was that technically a remake? Was it technically like a soft sequel? Where does it land? And actually, I thought it had always landed on remake, and I was just reading today that the director has gone on record saying that he considers it more of a soft sequel.
And Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell.
Yeah.
They've all confirmed that this is in the same universe as the original trilogy.
Yeah. So, which I didn't know originally how that, like, it's one of those kind of like, fine, whatever, like it struck me as negative at first, and then within 30 seconds I was like, all right, cool. So I don't know if it adds to it, but I don't think it takes away from it at all.
There's a lot of little hidden things in this movie, apparently, like Ash's broken down car is
cars
out there.
Yep.
And so there's the scene where, what's his name? The other guy, the long-haired guy. Eric tries to burn the Necronomicon, and it's not burning. And he says something like, I thought I can end it by burning it, but this book doesn't burn. That was apparently supposed to be a direct nod or a confirmation of why the book survived past the first movie.
Okay.
It didn't actually burn.
Doesn't burn.
It
yeah.
doesn't burn. Yeah. So that's supposed to be one of those little things.
Yeah.
And then Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell both have specifically gone on the record and said that the plan with this was to do the next movie was going to be called Army of Darkness 2, but it was going to be a sequel to this movie, and it was going to focus on Mia. But she was going to do the Army of Darkness thing. And then the third movie was going to bring Ash in to team up with Mia.
Oh.
And we were going to have Ash and Mia together in a third Evil Dead movie, which was going to be the end.
Yeah.
But then Ash versus the Evil Dead, the series happened, and the studio decided that's the direction we're going.
Okay.
So those other two movies just totally got axed.
Yeah.
So that's what happened there. So they definitely were setting something up.
Okay.
So that was more than just a little cameo at the end, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, or at least like they
I
put
like
it
that
there
show,
with-
but I would have liked to have seen that.
I know it's one of those things where
You
I'm
know?
like, man, Ash versus Evil Dead is really cool, and I'm glad it happened. But reading about this makes me kind of want to see where that would have went.
Yeah.
That would have been really interesting. So I don't know.
Well, everything Bruce Campbell is saying now and everything he said about the next one, which he hopes will begin. It's in pre-production. He hopes they'll be able to start filming next year, which means it'll probably be 2022 when we get the movie.
Yeah.
Evil Dead Rise is supposed to be in the city in a high-rise situation.
Interesting.
It's not a continuation. What he says now is that from now on, now that Ash and the Evil Dead is over and Ash is done, like from now on, all the Evil Dead movies will stand on their own. So everyone will be like its own story.
Okay.
That there won't be a continued continuity, that they're not meant to be, won't be a sequel. Because they say it'll have a female protagonist, but it's not Mia.
Yeah.
So from now on.
Well, and that's probably fine. Like, part of me, since I love continuity, I love things going together. I do think it's exciting to find out that this movie is technically part of the same universe. But as we were talking about, this movie stands on its own.
Yeah.
It's a really great horror movie. If they can do that again with the concept, I'm on board.
It's the best movie in the series.
It's
Far away, I think.
It's my favorite.
I really enjoyed it.
And it doesn't have to be. That wasn't necessarily a subjective, I think it is my favorite because of how well it works, but it wasn't even like, this is definitely like my favorite. It was just like, clear and away, this is what these movies were supposed to be, and it was such a return to form and then excelling beyond that, and, there's just no comparison with the quality on this thing. It is fantastic.
Yeah.
So if they can bring me some more of those and they all stand on their own, or they all go together, I don't care. If they're that good, whatever.
Yeah, totally.
And it's even totally it's got that kind of torture porn feel to it.
A little bit, yeah.
But it's totally done cuz I hate the Hostels.
Yeah.
One of our complaints about the new the remake of Friday the 13th was that it was like a little more like torture porn than it was like a slasher flick.
Yeah.
I don't know, something about it, and this one just worked.
It worked, it worked, exactly. I'm full of, when you make a movie that is just, how do we get the character into the next scene where he can, I can't even think of the right relation, but when they're just, it's like, they're just going to do terrible things. Yeah. For the sake of doing terrible things, and that's it. Like, there's not a lot of draw. There's not a lot of suspense to that, There's no... You're not rooting for anybody. You hate everyone in the movie. Yeah. Like, the bad guys are too bad to take seriously. The good guys are too stupid to care about.
Yeah.
Right.
There's just nothing there to it. When you get a situation like this, like, there is a good story involved in this. There, you can relate to some of the people or some of the events. There is a reason why things are going as terrible as they are. Like, you're talking about the ultimate evil, supernatural evil. So it makes sense when it keeps upping the ante on how terrible things go, as opposed to just some guy in Finland or whatever who likes to cut kids up.
Yeah.
So there's been a ton of games. Well, a ton. There's been several. I've only ever played.
Yeah, I saw a list of them, and I'm like, I remember one, maybe two of these existing.
Yeah. I played Hail to the King.
Yeah, Hail to the King was great.
It was great. Huh. And it was another one. It was
like
another one that.
PS2?
Yes, that's where I played it. And it was another installment that felt like kind of a separate universe to me.
Yeah.
'Cause it had all the elements, but it was definitely like it was like an army, or well, it was like a Evil Dead 1, but where Ash already had the chainsaw hand.
yeah.
So it was, so it kind of felt like another continuity.
Well, it worked as one of those video game sequel type, like when they did that with Ghostbusters or whatever. It's like, this isn't a sequel, but it plays like one, and it's got the right voices, and I'm just happy with the experience there.
Yeah. There's a musical. That was the other thing I wanted to bring up.
There's a musical.
I want to see it real bad.
I've got the soundtrack, but I've never seen the.
I won't listen to the soundtrack. Yeah. I usually don't appreciate a soundtrack unless I've seen the performance.
For sure.
I'm the same.
But I didn't have a way to see it, and I wanted to hear it, and I've listened to it. I probably only listened to it twice at most, and it's like I didn't get a lot out of it. But you can tell listening to it, like. If you have no visuals to put it with, musicals are always real weird for me. I don't get all the songs the first time I see it, and I don't usually follow the story that closely. Mm-hmm. And then, the ones I like, I'll go and listen to the soundtrack 4 or 5 times and kind of get used to it, and then I'll go watch it again, and I can put it all together. My brain will finally process it all as one thing now, and now I can decide whether or not I love it.
Yeah, totally.
So I've only got half the experience with this one, but if I can find a good venue to try it out, I would love to.
For sure.
Well, guys, seems like this is a franchise that we're going to get some more installments of.
Yeah, that's
I'm assuming we'll get it.
Let's be honest, 90% of the things we've done, we're going to get more installments of at some point.
No joke.
Yeah. Or don't die.
Yeah. Fair. And especially in the franchise craze we're currently in. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's ever going on.
That's the one thing I almost forgot to bring up. The most disappointing thing to me by far in the existence of these movies was the promise we had in the mid-aughts of when studios were starting to actually work together on stuff, and there was a lot of buzz around Freddy versus Jason versus Ash after Freddy versus Jason was so successful.
Yes.
Because that came out and made a ton of money, and everybody really enjoyed it. And there was supposed to be a bunch of those coming after that, and it's one of the weird few times in Hollywood where they had a formula that worked, and instead of overdoing it and ruining it, they just completely didn't do any more of it really at all for a while.
Well, the one thing Hollywood hates worse than not making money is sharing money.
Yeah.
So that's just not a thing that's going to happen.
Yep.
I believe there is a Freddy versus Jason versus Ash comic book line.
I think you're right. I think they did it in the comics. Yeah.
I think did Ash fight the Cenobites in the comics too? I think there's an Ash.
Whoa!
Pinhead.
What a great.
I think
that works so perfect.
Yeah.
More hell demons? Why not? That's perfect for Ash to fight.
I think
I would. I'd be all in if they would start doing some of these in animated form.
Man, me too.
Yeah.
How cool could that be?
That off.
Yeah.
They do plenty.
Now that we've got, I was going to say, now that adult animation is a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, half of the DC animated films are.
I was about to say, like, even with the superhero craze, you get some really great animated installments of that stuff. I don't know why they wouldn't do it with horror.
Totally do that. They could totally do that.
Somebody call Hollywood. Get them on this.
Well, guys, before we wrap, we do have a format to follow with the Freak Easy. So, who is your favorite character? And for this one, normally we pull out
the villain.
The villain.
So we can't pick the Necronomicon.
Well, for this one, I'm going to pull out Ash.
Yeah, that's tough.
So it's obviously easy to go to Ash.
It's easy to go to Ash. I mean, Me is fantastic.
Yeah, it's like a default at that point.
Yeah, it's the default because, man, her whole hero scene is epic.
Yeah.
It's so great. So, like, she's just the easy default after Ash is ripped out.
Yep.
If just to avoid the default one, if I had to pick one from the movies, what was, I can't remember his name though. The other, not Arthur, but the other.
The other king?
The other king. Yeah, Henry. Like, he was so subtle, but, like, just every time he was on there, like, at the beginning when they were just taking them all to their death, and he's just like, bleh. you know. And then they end up escaping and getting away or whatever, and then they show back up at the end. Like, that guy was just, he didn't hardly say or do anything, but he just seemed like the fact that he was taking all of this in stride what was interesting to me. If we're allowing Ash versus the Evil Dead, I like that little sidekick guy a lot.
Oh yeah,
I can't remember his name, right? Yeah. But as I've watched, I've only watched like half the first season of that, but that dude entertains me quite a bit.
Yeah, he's good.
About not Merlin.
Not Merlin.
When he's yelling at Ash about the magic words.
So,
I mostly said them.
Yeah.
You said all I had to do
maybe I didn't say every little tiny syllable.
You said if I
but basically I said them.
Yeah. I could send you back, but you're endangering the rest of us. Yeah.
Platu for necktie.
So I think we need to give an honorable mention to David, who is the brother in the new one.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
And he seems he is the one set up through that whole movie as the new Ash. And he is no Ash.
Right.
But he does a really good job of anchoring that movie. Mm-hmm. You know, like he is really holds that movie together while Mia is a deadite for most of it, you know, and he really anchors it well.
Yeah. Well, he's no Ash. He's a reasonably decent first movie Ash
for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
Shout out to Eric for taking the most punishment out of any character in any of these movies.
Man, dude,
that dude got stabbed in the eye with a needle. He got shot with a whole bunch of nails from a nail gun.
he got his hand split in half by that crowbar.
That dude got beat up by every deadite in the house. I mean. Yeah.
Remember that chick cut her own arm off with that carving knife?
Yeah. Oh my god. That was fun too. That was like
that felt like the chainsaw moment, type thing.
I know, because I was joking. I was like, "Oh, please attach that electric kitchen knife to your arm and make that."
Well, you know,
I'll carve a turkey.
Yeah, I also loved that they did the callback to the evil hand, but you know, the fighting your own hand would not have fit in that movie. Right. So it was it gave us both.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, I love too that it didn't even work. She cut her hand off to stop the possession. Yeah. She still totally got possessed.
Right. So I feel much better now. Oh, and then 2 minutes later, she's murdering everybody with a
nail gun.
Yeah.
But also, other honorable mention. Well, not other honorable mention. My pick is Annie in Evil Dead 2. The one who's the professor's daughter. Mm-hmm. She's fantastic. She shows up, her boyfriend gets turned into a deadite, and she's just right away I better translate these books so we can figure out what's going on. You know, she's great. She jumps right into that movie, ready to go. All right. Character you looked the most forward to getting murdered.
Scotty in the first one.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just ready for it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with
the guy that was running around the whole time, just whatever. You're ridiculous. That's stupid. You know, he was that guy the whole time, and it's just can't wait to see him get dead-eyed because he's the one running around yelling at everybody who's dying, and
and even after he chopped the one girl up with an axe, he was still like, this is crazy. We got to get out of here. This is dumb.
Yeah. So that was cool. And then obviously hillbilly trucker guy.
Yeah, I was about to say I'm going Cletus in 2.
Yeah, Cletus. Cletus. That's what we were calling him, was Cletus. Yeah, Cletus. We were ready for Cletus to go.
Jake was his name.
Okay. Apologies to all of our listeners named Cletus. No offense.
Is that a name?
Just felt right.
See, and I was saving him for my, or I was saving Eric in the new one, because when he was being such a jerk in the beginning, and then even though he pulls the book out of the basement and everybody tells him not to mess with it, and he reads that anyway, and so and he is going out of his way, because in that Necronomicon, people have scribbled out all the words and written warnings in red ink all through it, and he's still he takes pencil tracings to figure out what it used to say, and then reads them, and I'm just you deserve everything that's coming to you. And he dies horribly for that whole movie.
Yes, he does.
Yes,
he does.
Yes,
and it was funny too because it wasn't even he wasn't doing it to freak people out. He wasn't doing it to throw caution to the wind or laugh in the face of danger. He was sitting in a corner by himself, just doing it just to do it.
He's curious like a cat. But also, like, he's the one that read it, and he's the one that brought this on everybody. But then he was also the guy trying to warn everybody about it the rest of the time, and everybody was brushing him off.
Yeah.
Because he kept finding the pages and seeing the things that were about to happen before they happened, and he was making the connections. And even when that started happening, everybody was like, "Psh, get out of here with that nonsense."
Shut up, Eric.
So, yeah.
Would you listen to that guy?
Maybe not. All right. Here's what we came for. Favorite death.
Oh, man. Dang. Well, Mia chainsawing that demon in half at the end that we just talked about was pretty fantastic.
Pretty awesome.
The way
I
it
gotta
fell
think of a
down
new one
with
now.
its face peeled on the ground, like you saw the eyes on either side. That was insane. That was insane. So that was really good. Crap. What else?
I always love in the first one and in the recap when Ash shovel decapitates his girlfriend.
Yeah.
That's always. I always love that one.
And then her skeleton does ballet outside holding her head.
Yes.
In an amazing stop motion scene.
Yeah.
I'll give honorable mention to the little piece of my soul that dies every time I watch that chick lick that
knife.
X-Acto knife, that box cutter.
God.
The box cutter.
Yeah. But I guess I'll give the actual win to Evil Ash getting catapulted into the air and exploding.
Yes.
All right, guys. You ready for the bonus round?
Oh, there's a bonus round.
There's a bonus round.
I was born ready.
Favorite Ash quote?
Not ready.
It can't be groovy.
It can't be groovy.
Can't be groovy.
I can't even think.
Yeah,
of
let's
any.
say
That sucks.
the one-liner, give me some sugar, baby.
I was gonna
great.
say, give me some sugar, baby.
Give me some sugar, baby.
Yeah.
Hail to the king.
Hail to the king, baby.
I think I probably get the most joy out of that, and he does it 2 or 3 times at least when he's doing the maybe not all of it, but basically I said it. Yeah, what's the point?
I didn't say every syllable.
Yeah.
I didn't say every little tiny single syllable.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Because he does that at the
basically
end
said it.
too when he's telling the story to the guy at the S-Mart, and he's like,
Well, then that's
"So
when the
did you
Jedi
say it or
show.
whatever?" And he's like, "Yeah, basically I said it." Yeah.
That's good stuff.
I always love in the beginning when he's recapping in the beginning of Army of Darkness, where he's just like he's like I got it in my hand and it went bad, so I lopped it off with a chainsaw. Like that's just something to say.
Yeah.
You know, like that's just a thing.
Yeah.
Well,
and then
he does that same recap at the beginning of Ash versus Evil Dead.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
basically says it all again.
that just flashed into my head too. The that whole next one of you primates even touches me. This is my boomstick.
This is my boomstick.
I think my favorite Ash moment, I don't know if it's much of a quote, but my favorite Ash moment is when he cuts his hand off in the second one. Who's laughing now? Well, first of all, I love because he stabs his hand, and as the hand is like impaled on this knife, he just goes, like yeah, now it's your turn, you know.
Yeah.
But I also love that moment. It's a great moment. He cuts off his hand, but that's totally, I feel like, where the switch flips, where he's goes on the offensive with the Deadites. You know, like he's not just losing his mind. He's not playing. He's not playing defense anymore. It's like, all right, cool. I'll chop off my own hand, and then we'll go heads up.
Because that's where, then he put a coffee can on top of it, and then he put 3 books on top of that one, and one of them was a farewell to arms.
Yeah.
Or whatever. But then we were talking about that when we watched it, because that coffee can starts moving around, and I'm like, his hand was just dragging his, unconscious body across the floor. Why did he think 3 books on a coffee can was going to slow it down?
Oh my God.
That scene is also a super bananas payoff to that super silly scene where he's like smashing scenes. You know what I mean? Like 'cause right before, 30 seconds before he's lopping off his wrist with a chainsaw, he's smashing himself in the face with glasses. He grabs himself by the back of the head and does like a flip on the, you know, and
he does the flip.
Yeah, you know, so like, you know, just when you're like, is this too goofy? This might be too goofy. Then he saws his hand off with a chainsaw, and you're like, ugh, oh.
Yep. Bring it back. Oh, man. These movies are super fun.
I love them so much.
Yep. And it is. It's like
they're such
it's
easy
like
watches.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I wouldn't call the 2013 one an easy watch.
No, yeah.
But the first three are just. I mean, they fly by.
Well, and
We
that-
watched 1, 2, 3, and the first episode of Ash vs. the Evil Dead in one sitting.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
Like, just flew
and that's the other thing too. Like they all flow together.
Yeah.
Like even the old ones into the remake, if you want to look at it as a reboot, you can still make it flow fine. And also, they're 4 totally different movies.
Yeah. Agreed.
Well, guys, that's the Evil Dead. I hope you enjoyed talking about it. Hope you enjoyed listening to us talk about it as much as we enjoyed watching these movies. Let us know. What's your favorite Ash quote?
Ooh, I like it.
Hit it up in the comments below. Like, comment, subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're watching us on your favorite podcasting app, whether it's the Apple Podcast, the Google Podcast, Yahoo Music, Stitcher, Podbean, wherever you find us, make sure you rate us so we get up in that algorithm.
That's right, baby.
Leave us a review if you can do that. Guys, thank you for joining us. We will be back next week with...
Oh, I'm so excited for next week. We're gonna really turn up the camp next week.
Man, Ghoulies is next week.
Ghoulies!
So we're going to check out the 4 Ghoulies.
That's those little toilet monsters, right?
Yep.
Yes, the little toilet
I'm
goblins.
so excited.
So if you can find Ghoulies, make sure you give them a watch so you can follow along with us as we are covering Ghoulies next week right here on the Freak Easy. Same freak time, same freaky channel.
Groovy.
The Geek Easy Podcast is a production of PixelDan.com. Musical tracks used in the intro and outro are used with full permission of the respective owners or creators. Intro and outro narrations are provided by me, Brian T. Stevenson. PixelDan.com's The Geek Easy Podcast is provided for entertainment purposes only. The views expressed are those solely of the hosts or guests and do not necessarily represent those of PixelDan.com or any other party. Be sure to join us next time for another installment of the Geek Easy Podcast.